Guys, welcome back to another edition of Intuitive Angling. Really appreciate you guys taking some time to check the video out. And today we're going to have a discussion on what bass do after they're done spawning. What the post-spawn early summer transition is. And it's going to really surprise you because I think a lot of people get locked in, and to a big extent there's a myth about what bass do after they spawn. So I'm going to break some of those myths and go over some detail a little bit. But real quick before we get started, just want to remind you guys, give you the weekly reminder, if you guys haven't been over to fishthemoment.com, go check them out, man. We are piling in the new summer lake map breakdowns. Myself, Matt Steffen, Johnny Schultz. If you guys are looking for a great lake map or a great lake map that shows you some great places to fish, it gives you tips and advice on how to approach each area, you can check those out at fishthemoment.com. I'll include the link in the description. Much appreciated. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this movement, guys. I'm gonna start right off the bat. One of the biggest myths that exist in bass fishing is after the bass spawn, they move out to deep water to recuperate after spawning. Now, there's some truths and untruths with that, and a lot of it depends on the type of lake that you're fishing. You know, that the way that a bass moves after they're done spawning, and that transition from the post-spawn into early summer is totally dependent upon the geography of the lake you have. In my experience, one of the first places that bass actually will go from spawning out to deep water is if you're on some type of a ledge lake. Excuse me. For example, like, you know, all the TVA lakes, Chickamauga, Guntersville, Pickwick Lake, Lake Wheeler, all that type of stuff. When you have a ledge lake, most of those ledge lakes tend to be riverine a little bit, and those riverine lakes don't have as many like creeks and coves in them as an impoundment does. And you have the element of current is on top of that. And then you have big flats that drop off into the channel. That is one exception. Bass do move pretty quickly out to those ledges and drop-offs right after they spawn on some type of a ledge lake. But what happens on an impoundment, if you guys got like some type of just typical man-made impoundment, I don't care if it's you know, the highland impoundment with clear water or lowland impoundment with dirty water, an impoundment that has an abundance of coves in it, what those fish do a lot of times after they're done spawning, they hang out right there where they spawn for quite a while, sometimes up to like 3 weeks or so. And what they do there is not only they hang out in those particular areas after spawning to recuperate, but they do a lot of feeding. They're guarding fry in there. A lot of times the bluegill and the perch have started to move into those areas, and it keeps them in there because the forage is in there. And especially if you got areas that have a lot of cover in it, whether it be docks or wood or grass or whatever like that. So one of my favorite things to do in the post-spawn after those fish are done spawning, I don't really move. I stay pretty much in those same spawning areas, and I'll adjust my techniques. A lot of times what you can do to catch those post-spawn bass is you can back out a little bit deeper sometimes if the water's clear, and you can catch them like on a Carolina rig or a shaky head, maybe a crankbait or something on the outside of those areas where they've been spawning. And if you've got a flatter lake that's got some dirtier water and a lot more bank cover, you know, like shallow grass or shallow wood, those fish will stay right there where they've spawned at. If you've got a fish that spawned around a lay-down tree in the back of a cove and you've got 12 inches of water visibility, there's a good chance that fish can be there all through summer, because those bluegills will spawn back in those coves all summer long, keeping those bass back there. Now, what will happen is there's a population of the fish in a man-made impoundment that will go out to deeper water. So let's say, for example, if you're fishing a lake like Grand Lake in Oklahoma, which is a typical sort of a highland impoundment, you've got some diversity in water clarities. You got water clarities between 1 foot and 3 or 4 feet. So it's pretty good representation of a lot of lakes around the country. At this time of year, you know, towards the middle and end of May, first part of June, you'll have half of those bass, just like I told you guys, back in the coves, back in those same type of areas where they spawned at. What are you doing there?
Hi.
What are you doing?
I just want to go jump on the trampoline.
Okay, go in there. So you'll have half of those bass that are, you know, staying in those coves. They'll hang around boat docks or overhanging trees, shallow cover. And then you'll have the other half of the bass, the other 50% that will move out to those deeper areas, so secondary points, main lake points, any drop-offs, any deeper brush piles, that'll be going on at the same time. So in most man-made impoundments, you do have a couple different options. Now, a lot of those fish that move out, the depth that they move out will be dependent upon the water clarity. And what happens is some of those fish, if you've got water clarities that are like less than 3 feet of visibility, those fish tend to get on the bottom around any breaks or structure. But if you have water visibility of like over 4 feet, a clear water impoundment, you'll have a portion of those bass suspend and use the bottom on the same point. So you may catch some fish dragging a football head jig out on a point in 20 foot of water, and you may turn around after you catch one on a football head, you may turn around, cast out in the middle, deeper water off the point, and catch one that'll come up on a Zara spook out there that's suspended out off the point. So you need to take that in consideration, especially on any type of a blueback herring lake that goes on. So I guess the gist of the video, guys, is the big myth is that, the bass move out deep to recuperate after spawning. There's an element of truth to that, but in my opinion, there's just as many or more bass that stay shallow after they get done spawning and well into the summer, as long as you've got the cover and the food and the perch up there shallow. So hope that helps you guys out. Find a few more fish coming up over the next month, and we'll check in later. See ya.